the Eastern Front. Winter 1942. Temperatures drop to 40 degrees below zero. Weapons freeze, engines refuse to start, and soldiers, stripped of proper winter gear, are left to the mercy of nature's cruelty. Yet in this hell of ice and wind, men survived. They didn't survive because of high-tech clothing or heated shelters. They survived because of one ancient, nearly forgotten technique that weaponized the most basic resource every human carries, their own body heat. This is the story of the body heat trick that defied the cold. A survival method rediscovered in the trenches of World War II and refined under desperate circumstances. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't comfortable. But for countless soldiers on both sides, it meant the difference between freezing to death and making it through one more night. And the remarkable thing, it still works. Today, mountaineers, wilderness survivalists, and even modern militaries quietly use variations of this method. Let's dive into how this trick worked, why it saved lives, and how you could apply the same principle if you ever find yourself fighting cold with nothing but your own warmth. When we talk about the great battles of the Second World War, the mind conjures Stalingrad, the Ardennes, Finland's frozen forests, and the brutal Soviet winter offensives. But what most forget is that frostbite and hypothermia claim more soldiers than direct combat in many of these campaigns. The German Wehrmacht entered Russia in 1941, really ill-prepared for winter warfare. Supply chains were stretched thin, and, well, the assumption that the war would be over before the snow fell proved fatally wrong. Meanwhile, Soviet troops, though also under-equipped, had inherited survival wisdom passed down through generations of exposure to brutal winters. They knew that fire wasn't the only way to fight the cold. They used what they called teplo-obshchai, or shared warmth, a system of sleeping, layering and heat retention that used the human body itself as the primary source of insulation. The Germans quickly learned from captured prisoners and local peasants that the difference between life and death could come down to how you used your own body heat. The science is simple but powerful. The human body constantly radiates heat, about 100 watts when resting. When alone in freezing temperatures, that heat disperses into the environment and the body must work harder to maintain core temperature. But when multiple bodies are close together, that radiated heat is shared and trapped, creating a microclimate of warmth. This is where the Second World War body heat trick was born. Soldiers huddled close, shoulder to shoulder, wrapped in whatever material they could find, blankets, canvas coats, even straw mats. They sealed their group cocoon to trap the warm air inside. Within minutes, temperatures inside that human huddle could rise by 10 to 20 degrees Celsius. It wasn't luxury, but it was survival. In the frozen trenches near Leningrad and the snowed-in forests of Finland, small groups of soldiers would dig shallow depressions, or snow coffins as they called them. Inside they laid spruce branches or straw to create insulation from the frozen ground. Then they'd huddle, 3, sometimes 5 men, facing each other in a circular formation, legs intertwined, arms tucked in tight. They learned not to keep any part of the body uncovered. Bare hands or exposed faces quickly froze. They'd wrap scarves or cloth around their heads, leaving only small breathing gaps. Some troops even slept in shifts, 2 men pressed together for warmth, while the others rotated out to guard duty, ensuring that no one stayed still long enough to become dangerously cold. The same trick was used by Finnish ski troops, who operated deep behind Soviet lines. These men were absolute masters of conserving heat, you know. They'd wrap themselves in reindeer hides, bury their lower bodies under snow, which surprisingly insulates when packed just right, and rely on body heat and breath condensation to form a protective cocoon overnight. Modern survival research now actually backs up what those soldiers instinctively practiced. Studies show that close physical contact between 2 or more people can double the effective insulation of clothing layers by trapping shared heat in the boundary air between bodies. The same principle is used today in emergency survival. Mountaineers who fall victim to hypothermia are treated with what's known as human rewarming. That's a process where rescuers press their warm bodies against the victim's core, often inside a sleeping bag or emergency bivvy, to transfer heat directly. The trick isn't just warmth, it's efficiency, really. Body heat is constant and renewable. In an environment where fuel and fire are scarce or even dangerous to light, using human warmth conserves energy and reduces exposure risk. This technique isn't just history, it's practical knowledge every survival-minded person should know. Say you're stranded in a cold environment with limited gear. The key steps are nearly identical to those used on the front lines 80 years ago. First, insulate yourself from the ground. The earth draws heat rapidly, so create a barrier using anything dry: pine boughs, leaves, cardboard, or even clothing. Second, reduce air circulation around your body. Wind and moving air strip warmth instantly. Use a tarp, blanket, or coat to form a cocoon. Then, if you have others with you, use the shared heat system. Sit or lie close together, facing one another. The more surface area contact you can safely maintain, the more heat you retain collectively. Use clothing or a shared covering to trap the air around you. Even 2 people using this technique can prevent hypothermia in conditions that would otherwise be fatal. You can also use modified versions solo. Curl into a ball, keep limbs close to the torso, and cover your head completely to conserve heat. Just as World War II soldiers learned, the body's greatest heater is itself. Beyond the physiology, there's something deeply human about this story. These men, cold, hungry, and surrounded by chaos, found warmth not from equipment or orders, but from one another. In the darkest, coldest nights of war, survival depended on trust, closeness, and cooperation. One Soviet veteran, interviewed decades later, recalled, "When you woke up and felt the man next to you still breathing, that was warmth enough." That kind of unity turned a biological trick into a symbol of endurance. It wasn't just a fight against the elements. It was proof that the simplest acts of connection could defy nature's cruelty. In an era obsessed with high-performance gear, it's easy to forget that survival isn't about gadgets. It's about knowledge. The World War II body heat trick reminds us that technology can fail, but the laws of nature remain constant. Whether you're a soldier, a hiker, or simply someone fascinated by the raw ingenuity of the past, Understanding how to control and conserve body heat is timeless wisdom. The next time you hear about soldiers frozen in history's battles, remember that many didn't just succumb, they adapted. They used the only resource left to them, their own warmth, to fight back. The body heat trick wasn't a miracle. It was a mastery of biology under pressure. It turned freezing soldiers into their own heat source and proved that the human body, even in its most fragile state, can outthink the cold. If you value the hidden survival lessons buried in our past, this is just the beginning. There are countless more forgotten frontline stories of ingenuity, resilience, and raw human will that deserve to be remembered. So, if you found this guide valuable, make sure to subscribe to Forgotten Frontlines and share this with a fellow history or survival enthusiast. Because the past isn't just a story, it's a survival manual written in the hardest ink of all experience.